The FCC was established in 1930s as a under the Communications Act, 1934. The purpose of the FCC was basically to prevent, in a time where it was to prevent the, I guess, misuse or the dangerous inflammatory. I can't remember what the word is I'm looking for here, but you understand it's to not put graphic and things that be considered dangerous to the mind of children and stuff like that on the radio waves, on television at a time where these were becoming popular and more commonly used by people like the presidents at the time. FDR, I believe, was one of the first ever presidents to do his campaign through television. So due to this new unfounded this new form of technology that was being used at the time, they had to find a way to adapt to this and control it so that it wouldn't be, as I said, dangerous to children and to the public, as they called it. Their solution to this was to give the federal government a control and censorship over the media, which at the time may have been a very fast and rash decision due to such new technology coming to light so quickly. But in hindsight, is a clear violation of the First Amendment, because one of the most basic things of the First Amendment is that freedom of speech is a protected right. And that protected right is protected from the federal government. That's the purpose of the Constitution. The literal name of the FCC is the Federal Communications Commission, I think it's called, the Federal Communications Commission. It's in the name. It's a federal agency that's whose purpose is to censorship over people's speaking over things that people may share on television, things people may share over the radio waves. That's censorship. It's blocking freedom of speech. It's definitionally against the Constitution. The only reason that it ever passed through was because of the time that it was in and the lack of safety in the way that we do things when it's considered an immediate threat, especially in a time where there was a fear of foreign adversaries, infecting the minds of the public and stuff. And it's the same thing that basically happened with the what is it, the free radio or whatever in Europe against the Soviets. So it's the same practice being done in the U.S. It's to censor not just bad things such as curse words or graphic imagery and stuff like that, but also to censorship ideas that they don't like, political opposition, and it's very openly used by the federal government to do such things. That's why you cannot allow the federal government to control speech.
All right. Okay, so the directive, Lonzo, you said the directive was what again?
I mean, the directive. I never
Isn't like the prime reason.
The purpose of the FCC. The purpose of the FCC was for censorship. That's the whole thing that they were given. They were given the right to take away people's. It was to take away people's license.
The purpose isn't regulating interstate and foreign commerce and communication by wire and radio?
You can use the word regulation, but you can say that we're going to regulate your speech. It's still censorship. If you're going to say we're going to regulate communist ideals from being spread across the radio waves,
do we limit speech in other ways?
Do we regulate speech in other ways? Absolutely. But if it's by the federal government, then it's unconstitutional.
The federal government is what gives us freedom of speech. The First Amendment is made by the federal government.
No. The Constitution is what gives us freedom of speech. The Constitution is what prevents the federal government from interfering with our freedom of speech. Laws don't give us the right to not shoot people. Laws tell us that we're not allowed to shoot people. That's not the same way that works.
Yeah, but we still regulate it through Supreme Court cases, and then freedom of speech is not unlimited, right?
Freedom of speech, if in not defiance to the Constitution in the way that it's worded, would be unlimited.
The Constitution says freedom of speech is unlimited?
If it is, does the Constitution have any parameters around freedom of speech? Could you please read that to me? If you're saying the First Amendment, the Constitution,
I asked you, do you
the
think
First Amendment.
I asked, do you think the Constitution says freedom of speech is unlimited?
The Constitution has ratifications that have changed certain things about the freedom of speech, but if it is purely speech that we're talking about, then yes. Purely speech, yes.
Okay, that's it.
Not actions. Not if you say, I hate black people, and you punch a black guy, that's hate speech. Not, I'm going to blow up this building, and then you start gathering gunpowder. That's not freedom of speech. That's speech with actions. What do you mean? Those are action. You can be investigated for something that you're saying by the CIA or the FBI, and if you're found to be if you're found to be possibly committing some form of crimes, then or attempting to commit some type of crime, you're going to be arrested. That's just it's not associated with speech at all.
I'm just gonna do a little bit of a framing check really fast, okay? So when the claim is the FCC violates the First Amendment, it usually blurs two different ideas: regulation that manages a shared system versus regulation that judges a message. Those are not the same thing, and the debate turns on keeping them separate, maybe by action, like we just heard, or maybe by some magical principle. What's the FCC really? Start with the boring fact that makes the whole topic less dramatic. Radio spectrum is finite. If everyone transmits wherever they feel like, you don't get freedom. This is positive freedom, negative freedom, pretty basic stuff. You get interference instead. The loudest station wins and everyone else disappears into static. And at the end of the day, you can probably think to yourself, is there really freedom at that point? That's not a marketplace of ideas, it's a monopoly by wattage. The FCC's basic function is closer to traffic control than speech control. It's about licensing, technical standards, and interference rules that let many speakers coexist. More voices, less chaos. That's the point. And it is a continuum. So agencies sometimes cross the line. Of course, the First Amendment conflict often lives in the gray area zone, where keeping the signal clean slides into judging the context. That's a continuum of application and doctrine. Even if the constitutional text stays fixed unless amended, Jefferson warned that laws and institutions must be kept in pace with changing facts and changing minds, or they start fitting like a childhood code. So concede the risk, then I'm going to sharpen the logic. The FCC can be misused, narrowed, or struck down in specific actions. The agency's mere existence is not by itself a First Amendment violation. Some actions can violate. Existence does not.
I have a question for you, Circle. Would you consider that the FCC in its current existence, the way that it currently functions, to be a violation of the First Amendment?
No, I just said existence is not.
No,
a
because
violation.
you said its existence itself is not a violation, but it's still. You also said that most of the time it does not violate the Constitution. It's not really an
I
argument
don't
of saying
remember ever
that.
saying most of the time.
Well, you said most of the time it's just doing traffic control. So what is it doing that other percent of the
I
time?
said its basic function is. I never
It's
actually gave a majority, but I would assume it actually is most of the time not committing First Amendment violations.
Yeah, but what is it doing in the amount of times that it's not mostly not committing violations?
It may. It depends on the court.
It depends on the court if the FCC commits violations against the Constitution.
Yeah.
Okay, so the point is that currently it has at times violated the Constitution. We very flagrantly saw it violate the Constitution not that long ago with Jimmy Kimmel.
I'd like you to give me a case for that.
Do
you have any case?
With Jimmy Kimmel.
Well, you have to tell me where in court this was. I can give you a few, but I'm not going to do that. You need to tell me.
Wait, so okay. Shit. All right. You know what? This is. God damn it! I should know you were going to do this. He wants me to give him a specific court case of whatever they violated. My point is that we both know that they have at times done this. I can't deeply explain what happened with Jimmy Kimmel, but we know the point of them purposely. They have the ability to revoke licenses. They have the ability to revoke a license purely off of if they disagree with somebody. That is not.
But they've also expanded the freedom of being able to exist on radio and TV.
Yeah, but that does not counteract the point I'm making about them actually violating the First Amendment. This is not a question of if their good actions have outweighed the action that we're arguing about here. They've done it. That is a violation of the First Amendment.
So you think we should never limit any freedom of anything in the Constitution? Again,
no. I absolutely no. Here's the thing: is what you're not understanding is that you said in its existence currently, it is not a violation.
You think we should limit freedom of association?
I am saying that it could exist as not a violation of the First Amendment. Absolutely, if it does not have the right to revoke licenses purely off of a person's speech. However, I think you're right about it, controlling the airwaves and being like traffic control. That's absolutely perfect.
It doesn't control the airwaves. It just kind of manages.
Well, you said that you don't. Well,
it's like a traffic system, yeah.
That's
So whenever the
As I'm
FCC
trying to
revokes a
say,
license,
that
do
is a
you know
valid
what?
use
Do you
for the.
know
Listen,
how
that is
the
a
FCC
valid.
does that?
That is a valid use for the FCC. Yes, I know how
Do you know
they
how the
how they revoke
FCC
license.
revokes a
You're saying
license?
that the courts have to that they have to go through the courts, right, to revoke
Lonzo, do you
somebody's
know
license.
how the FCC revokes a license? Like, what does it have to go through for that to happen?
What process they have to go through to revoke a license? You just said they have to
Yeah,
go
do you
through
have any
Congress.
idea?
The
Do you know
Congress is the
where,
oversight for
in some
FCC,
case,
so
this may have
obviously they
happened?
have to. So, what do you mean by in some? Do you mean like a court or something? What are you trying to say?
Well, usually
What do you
the
mean? Do you
FCC
mean
will
like the
revoke a
building it's
license
done
for
in? What do
someone.
you mean the part of the
Well, usually
government?
the FCC will revoke a license when they found that the person they're revoking the license for has done what?
Violated the what's
Ah,
it called?
okay.
The 1936 Communications Act. My whole point of this that I started off with is that the 1936 Communications Act
Is what?
is a violation
Unconstitutional?
of the First Amendment. Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's the
How?
whole. Oh, we're gonna end up talking in circles. It seems. I'm
Like,
saying
how?
that because there's no reason that that the federal government should have any control over speech. That's what I'm saying.
Except we do. You already agreed to that.
Yeah, I agree that that's a violation of the First Amendment. The federal government should not have
It's
control
not,
over
though.
speech. How is it
It's not,
not?
though.
How is it
Again,
not?
I have this feeling that you thought that the founders, when they wrote the First Amendment, wrote in, like, some etched in,
No, it's not about what I
parable that was
feel about the
like
First Amendment. I read the First Amendment. It doesn't matter how they felt when they wrote it down. They could have felt like they didn't want people to talk at all when they wrote the First Amendment down. But I'm
but they
going off of
didn't,
what the
right? They
words are
didn't.
on that
That's
piece
not
of
how they wrote it.
paper. I'm going
But
off
that's
of what
not how
the
they wrote
words on
it.
the piece of paper says. The First
Okay.
Amendment does not permit the federal government to regulate our speech.
Yes,
Now,
it
the
does.
FCC can exist. The
Yes, it does.
FCC can exist with the purpose purely of controlling traffic for the radio waves,
It doesn't just control.
so that there's not one voice controlling the airwaves, so that there's not one big corporation that can take over the airwaves for all. That's fair. Regulation in that sense is perfect. I am in favor of that. However, I do not think they should be able to regulate the speech of people on the airwaves. If somebody says something inflammatory, I do not think that there should be any federal government agency that is allowed to step in and then remove them from the airways. And this isn't even really about how I feel about it. This is really about the First Amendment and the fact that it does not permit the federal government to do that thing. This is purely about what powers we're giving to the federal government.
And
The
what
FCC is
are
a
you
federal.
using to actually say this? What are you using? What case or what sort of
I'm not.
argument are we
See,
saying?
here's the thing, Circa, and you know I'm not going to sit here and do
And give me
the
evidence? That
case
would
of this
probably be a
person
shame, I know.
versus. This isn't the thing about evidence. It's simply in the name. It's called the Federal Communications Commission. It's a
Yes.
federal.
So let's say
It is
this.
a. It
If
is
the
a.
FCC only prevented interference, as in frequency
Mhm.
coordination, power limits, technical standards, would it still be unconstitutional? Yes or no?
No, no.
So your position
And
is
you're going
if
to
the
say that it's
government may not
limiting somebody's
manage
speech.
spectrum at all, it's
It-
unconstitutional?
what do you mean spectrums?
As in, like, if it doesn't
Spectrums
manage
of
the spectrum at all? As in, like, anything in between?
anything in between. Anything in
Can it
between
limit
what space
any
you take
type of
up.
speech? Can it limit any type
No,
of speech?
no,
None.
it should not. No, it should not,
Okay.
unless the
So again,
speech
you
is
think that the
paired
First
with
Amendment means we
action.
can't limit any kind of speech at all?
No, that is no. I am saying
So
that
what kind of
any
speech
form
does it limit?
speech that is matched with action, which is then again
As
also
action?
illegal due to the action itself, not because of the
The
speech. The
action
federal
is
government.
illegal, therefore the speech that's associated with the action is now illegal via the First Amendment? Is that what you said?
No, but the only connections that you can make between federal government and action and somebody's speech is the action itself. If somebody were to say that they're going to shoot up a gay club, that's not illegal
Mhm.
technically. Or well, it would be in this situation, I guess. They could investigate you for it. But
So the
by
action's
if we're
not
going purely
necessary.
off of the first, so if we're going
So
purely
the
off
action's not
of
necessary.
no. But I'm saying if we're going purely off of the First
No, it is.
Amendment, if you're going purely off of the First Amendment and what it says,
Mhm.
then no. The
Look, man,
federal
if
and
you're not
also
gonna
the
make
federal government.
a facial claim, then you concede that this is about specific FCC actions or rules that may be unconstitutional, right? Some of them are, though, like you mentioned earlier, right?
Yeah, some of them are unconstitutional.
But some of them aren't.
Yes, like controlling the
So
airwaves.
that means this is about where the line is drawn, right? Not that the FCC is inherently unconstitutional.
The prompt doesn't say that the FCC is inherently unconstitutional.
It
The
says the
FCC
existence of
it
the
says
FCC is unconstitutional.
It says the existence of the FCC is unconstitutional. And I'm making the point that in the
Yep.
current state right now, it is
So you
unconstitutional
just
because
agreed that some
those
things
things
it does is constitutional, some isn't. Isn't that kind
that
of
is your your argument is not you're not trying to make the point that the FCC is occasionally constitutional. You're trying to make the point that the FCC
well,
is
no agency is
constitutional.
going to be. I'm sorry, ma'am. That's just how it works. We have to like interpret
That's
reality, right?
that is absurd
That's
then.
hard.
So then okay, so then your point is that the FCC isn't constitutional. Or that it's not completely
No, my point
constitutional.
is not
It's
that
just
it's
not completely
unconstitutional.
constitutional. It's just partially at times not constitutional.
It's a continuum, because the founders knew that whatever they wrote down on the paper, that little sentence you read
Okay, what
isn't
are the
going to be
repercussions if
like
the FCC
objective.
if the FCC lashes out towards anybody who is that they did against Jim Kimmel and they try to pressure somebody off the airwaves, they use their
Sure.
power in an unconstitutional way. Is there repercussions for it used through the Constitution?
Well, we already agreed that you think some things are constitutional, some things aren't, right? That would be unconstitutional.
Okay, is there any form of repercussions that the FCC would pay for violating the Constitution?
The agency itself, what are we going to find the
Yes.
agency itself? I mean, there needs to be repercussions, but this isn't really about whether or not the existence of it is unconstitutional now, is it?
Well, the federal government can receive repercussions if they violate the Constitution.
I don't think you answered my question, but it's fine.
I'm making the point that you're saying that occasionally that it is unconstitutional, but most of the time it isn't. Yeah,
I
but
never said most.
the existence of the FCC itself kind of avoids even because as I mentioned in one of my former debates, the point of the Constitution is the repercussions to keep the government in line. That does not apply to the FCC because
What if,
there
what
are
if
no
hypothetically
actual
we could
repercussions for stepping
magically
outside of the
let's think of a
Constitution.
thought
So
experiment,
if it's
Lonzo.
ever occasionally
Lonzo, let's think of
unconstitutional,
a
then
thought
it's just
experiment, okay, my
completely
friend?
unconstitutional.
Let's think of a thought experiment. What if we could hypothetically get rid of everything unconstitutional it's done and only kept the constitutional stuff? Is it inherently unconstitutional now, the existence still?
Yeah, the fact that it still has the power to do those things does make it unconstitutional. Yes, you are right.
Okay, got it, yeah. What?
I said the Communications Act of 1936 and the powers that it gives the FCC in the first place are what makes it
I
unconstitutional.
just said if we hypothetically get rid of everything unconstitutional that it's done.
The Communications Act of 1936 is what gave the FCC. It's what created it. What do you mean?
Are you saying
I'm saying that it's
unconstitutional?
yes, the powers that are given. No,
what
not
are you
the act as
using
an
to inform
entirety.
yourself on
The
this, my
powers
friend?
that are
What
given
are
to
you
the
using to
FCC
inform
within
yourself?
that act is what is unconstitutional.
What are you informing yourself with on this? How are you going to say that the act itself is unconstitutional?
I just said that the powers it gives the FCC within that act is unconstitutional.
That has nothing to do with what I just asked you.
It
It seems to me like you think the act itself is unconstitutional.
That's what I'm.
As in, like, is it the creation? I'm actually unsure what it is.
Not. So. Not the creation of an act that would in any way help. That would help with the flow of the radio waves, especially at a time where it was a brand new technology and they
So
did
the
not
FCC
know
is
how to
not
use it.
unconstitutional then, because that's what it does. Right?
I am talking to a brick wall that is not trying to expand beyond this. I get that you can say things that may sound, you may be convincing some people right now that this is intelligent conversation coming from your end.
Fine. Let's
But
move
I
on to
promise you, if you just look under the hood of what he's saying, he is talking in circles in complete bullshit.
I know, it's the
The
carburetor.
FCC is unconstitutional because of the powers that was given to it through the Communications Act of 1936. They should not
again,
even.
You're saying that the Communications Act itself is unconstitutional. Doesn't it prescribe these unconstitutional powers? Are they magic powers?
If I am actually gonna lose my shit. Okay, let's just say that the act never gave any provisions for power, and the entire thing. There's no power given to any agency at all in that act, and it just said there is now a new branch. There is now a new government agency called the FCC. Nothing else. That's it. It would not be unconstitutional. It would just be stupid to do, but it would not be unconstitutional. So it'd be dumb for me to say that the act itself. No, it would be dumb for me to say that the act itself is unconstitutional. I am saying the powers given to the FCC specifically in that act is unconstitutional.
What are those powers and why are they unconstitutional? I don't know.
At the start of the conversation. I have been. I have.
No, you keep saying
Fuck it.
powers. I want you to tell me what they are.
Fuck it. We're at the last 10 seconds. I'm gonna go drink another one of these because this is crazy.
Congress shall make no law. That is what the actual First Amendment says. So my question to you, Lonzo, is how is it that Congress creating an agency who then forms the regulations that control the speech would be a violation of the First Amendment?
Well, because the Constitution also says that any rights not given to the federal government are given to the states, and the FCC is a federal agency still, and is also made from Congress. I mean that's basically me saying it twice, that it's a federal agency, but you get what I'm saying.
Lonzo, are you reading the prompt that this specific executive agency is unconstitutional because it's the powers that were granted to it based on inception are unconstitutional, and by removing those powers and restructuring this agency, it would then be constitutional? Thus, all the other things it does doesn't matter.
Yes, that is the way that I perceive this.
So the Constitution guarantees us the right to freely travel between states. So say like in a national park, would it be illegal for the federal government to have road laws?
Hold up. Is that the exact wording in the Constitution, that it guarantees the right to legally travel between states?
Are you going to quibble over the exact wording?
Because,
hold on, I'll have to pull it up.
Well, I know I'm saying that because if it does, then
it's basically the privileges and immunity clauses in the 14th and the 14th Amendment.
Listen, I'm going to assume, I'm purely off of the wording that you just
assuming what I said is correct.
Yeah, then yes, it'd be unconstitutional to have road laws that prevent us from traveling between state to state freely. If that's what the Constitution says, then it would be unconstitutional. Unless there's a provision somewhere else in the Constitution that says, unless the state decides otherwise, or unless the federal government decides otherwise. But unless there isn't, I mean, if there isn't, then it's unconstitutional. It's that simple.
Can you give me some case examples that support your claim? Can you give me the references that support
Sable
your
versus
position?
FCC 1989.
What was it called? Say it again, please.
Sable versus FCC 1989. Turner Broadcasting versus FCC. We can do like Reno versus ACLU 1997. We can do United States versus Playboy Entertainment Group. We could do Hurley versus Irish American Glib Assen. Lovely one, 1995. This is a supplemental case, though.
And those are all cases where the courts decided that the FCC was legitimate in their restrictions.
The last one is not specifically FCC, but it does help shape things the FCC does. The first ones I gave you they're communication-specific Supreme Court cases.
All right, thank you.
Though you think the existence of the FCC itself isn't a violation of the First Amendment, do you think the FCC chair, when he said we're not done yet after the Kimmel suspension,
the current one
was like the end of end of 2025, I think it was. But do you think that was a violation of an abuse of his power against the First Amendment?
I mean, against the First Amendment, I don't think there is an amendment. I don't think that actually would qualify in a case. But if you want my personal opinion, institutions are only as strong as people want them to be. And right now we're being stress tested. This is, I think, a separate question. The current FCC chair is not interested in, trying to do things by the First Amendment, which is what the FCC is tasked to do. But I think this is a separate question, and I don't agree with it.
Yep. Again, just a clarification question. I want to see if I'm interpreting your entire argument correctly here. Circa, it seems as though you're more arguing from the position based more off the prompt in that you're saying that the existence of just an executive agency named the FCC is constitutional. Thus, by default, if he admits that, you win. And even if they have these powers, those powers could not be used or they could be taken away. And then you would technically be 100% correct. It seems as though that's the position you're arguing.
I'm going to be honest. I think the label is unimportant. It could be, probably don't even hypothetically need an FCC. It just kind of helps to have this agency be able to do these things. But yeah, kind of in a way, because if you think about how freedom of speech is regulated anyway, we kind of needed an agency to do that with more efficiency. So in a way, yeah, I mean, the existence of it in and of itself, if he can accept that, is kind of conceding the bait, yeah.
Okay, so basically he just said that the FCC is not a violation because you could name any federal agency. He just agreed with Tyler's idea that you could name any government agency, the FCC, and it could have these violations against the First Amendment, but its existence itself, because we're so technical that we mean that the existence itself, like just the idea of it being made by Congress, is not a violation, which is so broad that I almost feel like a person just wants to say I'm wrong on this one, because there's no way that you could just be like its existence, because it could exist differently. It could exist differently, which means that it's not a violation. But he's also saying there are a lot of other government agencies that violate our First Amendment. The federal government regulates our speech all the time. So every agency is violating our First Amendment. What's different about this one doing it? That's an absurd thing to say when you're saying, does it violate the First Amendment? But okay. None of that works. None of that works. None of that makes sense. The idea that because it has the ability to be checked if it violates our First Amendment doesn't mean it's not doing it, which is different from my argument before about the Constitution being a useful piece of paper. The reason it's a useful piece of paper is because that whenever you do violate the Constitution, there are consequences for doing so. But the idea that when you violate the Constitution, because there are consequences for it, that it's not a violation of it's absurd. You're just basically saying that it's acceptable for them to violate the First Amendment because other people are doing it, because other federal agencies are doing it, and because it can possibly be forced to go back on that, such as its removal of Jimmy Kimmel from the air. I don't really see the argument there, that you're basically saying it does violate our First Amendment, but it's not. It doesn't have to. It could be a different organization. That doesn't make sense. Or it could be a different whatever the fuck you want to call it, agency. It doesn't make sense. Your argument just it doesn't make sense. If you want to be that literal about the word existence, I guess you could make that imaginary idea that somehow means that it's not, that it doesn't, in a different way, it wouldn't violate our First Amendment if it just wasn't the institution that it currently is. But to say that the powers that were given in its inception in the first place or not what makes it a violation is crazy, and I don't even fucking know why I'm debating that idea. So yeah, that's my time.
I think this comes down to a really simple question. Are we judging an agency by its nature or by its worst moments? So the airwaves aren't an endless field. They're a narrow bridge. If everyone rushes at it at once, the loudest transmitter wins and everyone else gets pushed into the ditch. That's not really free speech. That's a power contest dressed up as liberty to be free speech. So the FCC's core job is coordination and like traffic control, like I mentioned earlier. Licensing, interference control, technical standards. It's closer to traffic lights than thought police. And yes, I'll say the quiet part out loud because it matters. The line can blur. The First Amendment fights happen on a continuum, again, where managing the signal can slide into judging the message. When that happens, it should be challenged, narrowed, reversed, and that's what courts are for. And this is where Jefferson's warning still lands. Institutions have to fit the times, or they start pinching like an old coat. In the case I cited earlier, Sable versus FCC in 1989, this specific case was about making sure that indecency over telephone was punished more. So the consequences that Lonzo here was just talking about, I think he's unaware of the fact that the FCC is the way we actually give those consequences in some ironic twist. But none of that proves the agency is unconstitutional by definition. It proves something more ordinary and more true. Power needs guardrails. And again, some actions can violate. Existence does not. And that's my closing.